This show is such a roller coaster, and I mean, I've been loving this show since the beginning. I've loved it now throughout all 23 out of 24 episodes, but I really walked in thinking that, yeah, of course, Nase would pull Mirai away, Saki would get killed. Ultimately, by the time we reach the end of this episode, Mirai would be God, and we'd see where it goes from there. But the direction they went in this episode, from the reaction, in my opinion, of just like, holy shit, when you see what's going on with Nase, because even though she can interact with Mirai to prevent him from dying where he was supposed to, you know, she ultimately gets demoted a rank, meaning, what do you want to keep? Do you want to keep your wings, or do you want to keep your red arrow? And that's a pretty hard question to answer, given the fact that if you don't have wings, you can't run away from a white arrow. But at the same time, if you basically give up the red arrow, then therefore your servants, the other people that are helping you, won't have their wings. It's just such a complicated situation. And I love seeing the build-up and how they actually ended up reversing it in the same episode, but in a pretty realistic way, given the rules that we come to know and expect from this. The fact that she ultimately ended up saving the professor because it wasn't her own person that she was working with, gets promoted, he doesn't even want the damn things, and then we end with Nakaumi becoming God, which is what they originally agreed with to begin with. And it actually makes a hell of a lot of sense while ending the episode, making it seem like the professor's theory was right, and that you do become a creature, not just God. I mean, at first it was looking like, okay, he's took over the previous god's body, all's gonna be well, he's a supreme being, but nothing should go too wrong, and then you see the possession and the fear of the creature taking over, and what a way to set up a final episode, if you ask me. I mean, it's hard to even predict what the internet thinks of the show anymore, since people were writing it off before it even started airing. But I like the idea of, rather than Mirai having to sacrifice his happiness in this moment, instead he actually gets a shot at it, with them remembering, getting the choice. Do you want to remember? Do you want to forget? And ultimately only one person decides to forget, and it's the person who makes the most sense, because she just wanted a life of luxury, doesn't want to remember the hell, and the professor's like, yeah, I'll take care of you at this point. Because he's now been saved by angels 2 times, you know, he's a little shook up to say the least. And for me personally, I didn't see the professor being defeated in the way that they did, but I actually like the fact that they went about it in a pretty realistic way. I mean, they always say that your life flashes before your eyes when you are about to die. You think of all these things, you know, the people who ended up surviving those life or death moments, they constantly talk about it. And I think the idea of him having such a strong opinion on the demons floating above him, and the idea of a creature, and just what it means to find the truth, while simultaneously kind of hating himself and what the world has perceived him as. Ultimately, it's easy to forget when a character is being presented as a very smart person. Look at the audience reaction. He has a Nobel Peace Prize. He's the smartest person in the world. He sold 1 million books. He's the perfect person to be God. People put him on a pedestal when he doesn't even think he's a genius. People are worshipping the things that he's done, not necessarily him as an actual person. And I like the idea of, like, easily forgetting that he was, too, suicidal. Like, he didn't really have that high opinion. He recognizes by the end that he doesn't understand people, and that maybe he was going about it wrong. But it's easy in the moments to present him as either the villain or the antagonist or the person who has everything wrapped around the palm of his hand, when in reality, he's just like the rest of them, someone who was on death's doorstep, and when you have it not once but twice flash before your eyes, at that point you just gotta say, I'm done with it. And I think that's a pretty satisfying finale for something that was not being presented as a Metropolitan arc. We're not here just trying to kill him, we're not just here trying to fight people. The idea of plans and executions, the fact that his plan didn't work out, you know, Nakaumi not giving that white arrow to her, I mean, ultimately things would have worked out okay. But I like the idea that with such a basic rule set, white arrows, red arrows, wings, what can angels do, what can angels do, we've continuously over 23 episodes refined and kind of fleshed out what things can happen in terms of how they're going to be presented in such a meaty and substance-filled way. I mean, the idea of you can't shoot someone with a red arrow and tell them to become God. That goes against the rules. But if you shoot someone with a red arrow and they want to become God before you shot them, then they can announce and become God. But it works in the same way with killing, right? You know, for Nakaumi, even though he had a twisted worldview on just guiding people to death, he never wanted to hurt people. So the idea of him not killing, and the fact that he ultimately got rid of the tool that would make him kill at basically if he was forced at gunpoint, I think just makes total sense. And I'm sure there's going to be people who will say that doesn't make sense and blah, blah, blah. But if we trace back the mindsets of the character arcs and what's happened, it all lines up in my opinion. And that's what makes the kind of like announcement for the world, like what the hell, 13-year-old kid's gonna become God, makes no sense. What about the all-star professor? He's a genius, he's this or that. Screw this God selection process. But ultimately, that's what they agreed upon weeks back. And if the professor is like saying, I'm just gonna go kill myself, but then you have Nakaumi saying, I will guide you the answer. Even though he can't directly interact with the human world, there's other ways to pass on messages, which would be very interesting. Because had he remained in control, which it's still up in the air if he is in control, if he's actually being corrupted by what's so-called the creature, but the idea that he could leave messages in different ways, like things are beautifully happening around the world peace gets restored or something, that would prove that he's out there and it worked. But then if something really, really bad starts happening, then obviously the creature theory would be confirmed, right? It's just really cool to see how they kind of did everything in such a satisfying way, and in any other show, that could have been a pretty easy to work with ending. Add 5 minutes of Mirai and Saki happy and call it a day, but this is Platinum End, right? This has been a pretty suffering-filled show, all things considered. So to have an entire episode of essentially epilogue and aftermath is exactly what I was hoping they'd build up to. Had we left this episode still not resolving who would become God, there wouldn't be enough time in my humble opinion. But 24 episodes seems like the perfect pace for this show. I know some people were a little worried before the anime started up. There's this many chapters, is 24 episodes enough? Some people saying I want like a Death Note run, 36 to 39 episodes. Other people already trying to rush the show off before they even watched it. But I mean, the show has been pretty damn consistent. Sure, the production could have been a bit better throughout the run. I mean, there's always your static still shots, no faces detailed, things like that. But I mean, the show's directing is so spot on. Look at Nase's kind of corruption scene and being like turned into stone. The reversal, the God scene, the moment where humanity gets frozen other than the God candidates. There's some really good production details, even if it's not a 10 out of 10 visual spectacle every single frame. Either way, I mean, I've been humming and hawing how strongly I feel about this show because I've consistently thought it's been a great show since the beginning. And honestly, as the arcs have progressed, I've enjoyed it more. I think depending on how episode 24 concludes for me, I know the ending is controversial, and like I've said in previous videos, I know the idea of the ending, but I don't know specifics and details. That's why I was honestly yeah, Mirai's probably gonna end up being God or something like that, and that's why it's still shocking to me. But I think if it goes in the direction like I feel it's gonna go, even though I could understand why people may not like it, I think for me it's gonna be a very impactful ending that is going to be remembered for years down the line for the people who actually stuck with Platinum End and didn't just decide to go with the Reddit hate train and say, oh, people are hating it, I'm gonna hate it, and why isn't characters killing, blah, 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 we want Death Note, which you should have wanted Death Note to begin with. It's a completely different show, even if some of the themes are similar, right? But thoughts if you have any on this week's Platinum End. What do you hope to see with episode 24 next week? Leave a like if you enjoyed and subscribe if you're new around here. Until next time, everyone, please take care and have a good one.